It's a beautiful day in early May. I rode my bike to Ford Lake because I wanted to tell you about something that happened when I was a kid. An environmental disaster. It lasted a week or two on Ford Lake. This is Ford Lake. Upstream, this is the Huron River, there's a dam downstream called Ford Dam that Henry Ford built many years ago. But the environmental mess I'm about to tell you about took place when I was a kid. Old timers, some of them, refer to it as the Carpocalypse. And if there had been internet in those days, it would probably have been an international story, because the dunce cap should be worn by the people in the 60s that decided to do what they did. Bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, and luckily they messed up the environment with a naturally occurring chemical. You get it from some plants. It's called Rotenone. See, what happened was, before the 1960s, there was no EPA, and it was very common for businesses for 100 years to just say, okay, well, let's locate our paper mill or our chemical factory right along the shores of a river so we can get rid of all the waste products. We can just dump it in the river. And citizens treated the river the same way. Hundreds of years ago, it was, oh, my horse died. Well, I'm not going to dig a giant hole to bury this horse. I'll just dump it in the river. There are all kinds of historical accounts of how poorly we treated our environment because everybody else did. And then suddenly, when I was a kid, and this river was very polluted when I was a kid, and now, even though it's muddy, the water isn't clear because it flows through farmland and bottomland, not like a mountain river that's clear most of the time. The Huron River is clean, but it was a mess. Tires, garbage floating in the river. It wasn't developed like it is now. See, people look at it as an asset, and it is. Did I mention that Ypsilanti is right maybe 3 miles that way? We're in Ypsi Township. I'll do my map thing. This is cool. This is Bridge Road in Ypsi Township. That's Ford Lake, where the Carpocalypse took place. This is the power generator. In fact, they've got a team working on it now. I saw their trucks. Something must be wrong with it, but it's hydroelectric power. And I was telling you about Carp, and there they are. I'll zoom in for you. There we go. Press the right button, Dougie. Well, that's handy that they're at that pipe, because my viewfinder in this bright sun is not very good. That's how I can find them. And that is a carp. I think it's a buffalo carp. See the other two? I think it's their mating season. I don't know if that's mating behavior in any way. I know they like shallow water that's flooded in the early spring when the snow melts, so they can get back into the nooks and crannies where it might not be that deep of water all year. I don't know much more about carp behavior, because it really don't interest me that much, because I hear they fight like crazy. But so, I'm a kid, and the river was infested with an invasive species, carp. Carp are bottom feeders. They can take a lot more pollution than the natural food chain species of pike, walleye, bass, largemouth and smallmouth, bluegills, and perch, and minnows. Anyway, getting off on a tangent. So the food chain had been disrupted by the invasive species known as carp. This environmental episode is known as the Carpocalypse, if you could believe it. See, what happened was, they decided, which was a very wise decision, let's clean up this river. let's get rid of the pollution. Let's enact laws and enforce laws to clean up the Huron River basin. And they did that. They got the water quality high enough that the natural food chain of pike and walleye and carp and bass could be restored. But you had to get rid of the carp because they took over. In a polluted environment, they can take a lot more pollution. So nobody knew because the water is all cloudy and they didn't do a survey. Nobody knew how many carp were in Ford Lake. They just knew that there was a great way to get rid of them, and that way was with this chemical called Rotenone. What it does is it basically shuts down the function of the fish, all fish. They can't use their gills anymore. Rotenone is in the water in a high enough concentration. Anyway, battery died. I had to stop telling the story. But I'm back to it now, and it's an amazing story of the Carpocalypse. So, they don't know how many carp are in here. They know they want to kill them all, and any fish, and then restock with the food chain that was naturally occurring before all the pollution and all the invasion of the carp. So they went ahead and did that. And they did it with a little motorboat and 2 55-gallon drums of Rotenone. They puttered around here. Oh, before they did, here was their plan. All right, we're going to kill some carp. We don't know how many. But carp are probably something that the local housewives would want to come out here and pick up from the shorelines of Ford Lake. That's how we'll deal with however many carp we kill. Yeah, housewives want to fill their freezer with carp. All they can do is come down to the river, grab some poisoned fish, and fill their freezer. So we'll publish recipes of how to cook fish, and we'll tell all the local people that that's a great idea. Come on down after we poison these fish. And then they talked to some people that lived along the shoreline. This is way developed now, see? They talked to them and said, hey, if we were to kill some fish to clean up the river and put in the species that are supposed to be there, would you come down there and pick up some of those fish and use them, or even help us clean up? Enough people answered the survey and they said, yeah, we'll help you. Well, nobody knew how many carp were in there. But they found out because they puttered around. They just opened the bung of the 55-gallon drums, put it in the back of the rowboat, and puttered around. Well, a day later, thousands and thousands and tens of thousands. The carp just kept floating to the surface dead. There were way more than they thought they were. And lo and behold, nobody wanted to volunteer to come down and pick up all the carp and put them in their freezer and gut them and skin them and whatever they had to do. Carp is not a favorite fish of people. You never see it for sale in a fish market because it's bony. It tastes muddy because they're bottom feeders and they stir up the bottom of the lake by feeding that way. So carp is not a prize fish. They had a ton of fish. They had no plan B. And then these fish started to rot. They floated to the shoreline in the tens of thousands. They were rotting. They were stinking so bad. Belleville's down here past the Ford Dam. The people in Belleville were saying, what are you doing? What did you do? When are you going to stop? And so finally they had to call in the state to force the prisoners out of prison in gangs with shotguns on them to pick up these rotted fish. It was just a disgusting mess. And so that is the story of the Carpocalypse, which, think of it, it would have gone viral. They would have had, picture after picture of the shoreline lined with dead, stinking fish. They would have interviewed a whole bunch of angry citizens, the DNR, which I have tons of respect for. But in this case, they were not as sophisticated, not as scientific, not as the well-run machine that they are today. And I'm very proud of the DNR. I spend so much time out in the woods, and not only here, but every state's DNR regulates things. They take the funds from the hunting and fishing licenses, different fees for boat launches. They keep the water clean. I know it could always be improved, but it's from going back in time to when I was a kid. And you couldn't go down to the shoreline without seeing all kinds of trash. People just threw their trash in the river. Anyway, so that was a boneheaded decision in the 60s by some DNR guy that thought housewives were going to solve their problem with the carp cleanup. Didn't happen. They had to force the prisoners to do it, which would also be about millions of lawsuits filed by every prisoner that got forced by shotgun to come out here and pick up rotted fish. It was a disaster. And it's comical because the Rotenone dissipated. The carp did get cleaned up. The river was cleaned up, and when I was a boy, once I saw this in the newspaper and said, well, that means I could go down there and I could fish, I could catch fish. I used to ride my Stingray bicycle down there with my fishing pole across the handlebars, and I used to catch fish in Gallup Park on the Huron River. So they screwed up and they cleaned it up. The Carpocalypse. This is Ford Lake, the scene of the Carpocalypse. Well, you know that they didn't kill every carp, because there's a big one. This is the carp from Ford Lake that I just caught that I wanted to show you. He's a monster. That is a big carp. I wish I wasn't a one-man band, because somebody needs to help me get this thing up. I'll just try it on my own. It'll probably break off. Oh, he did. Good. Now he's free. Go on, carp. Thanks for the battle. It was fun. Well, now we know. The carp have not been eradicated from Ford Lake. That was cool. That's the first carp I ever caught. No, that's the second one. That's the first lunker. That was a big carp. It was probably, I don't know, 30 inches, maybe more. That was fun. We'll do it again. That river, it is not a lazy river. It is just like full of energy. It scoured a groove in the regolith, beginning with the end of the last ice age. I love it. I wanted to show you how this dam works. This is at the end of Gallup Pond in Ann Arbor. See how there's a spillway? It's like a big gate, and they can open it or close it, but carp, dead carp, are not going to get in that slot because they float when they die. So there'd be a big mob of them up there floating around, but nothing would go through the dam. I wanted to clarify that in a place where I could get a good picture. This isn't Ford Dam, this is Dixboro Dam, but it's the same principle. I'm in Ann Arbor. This used to be the only bridge over the Huron River in this area. I was a kid when they built that bridge over there. That's Huron Parkway. Beyond that is more land that they've sculpted around the river to make it really nice. So today I rode from, well, we were at the Ford Lake Dam, almost near Belleville, and I've ridden as close as I could to the river all the way back here, and I'm a couple miles from home. Good, because it's starting to get dark and I'm starting to get tired. But the point I wanted to make was I wanted a shot of some dead carp floating in the river so I could give you a visual. What's that look like? All the miles that I have ridden today with my eyes peeled, I have not seen one dead fish, including carp. And I've hardly seen a scrap of trash. What a beautiful place. What a beautiful comeback. The Huron River. I saw it happen in my lifetime.